battlefields of the future will be more dangerous than ever. In the 21st century, there will be threats to our freedom and security like never before. But will we be ready? Battles will be fought on land and sea, but they will not be won without supremacy in the air. Enter the incredible world of 21st century combat.
Air power is the dominant strategic force. It's air power that lets you influence events and respond to events quickly. It's air power that lets you fight a war without putting hundreds of thousands of people on the ground.
To date, Air Force F-15s have won more than 150 dogfights against enemy fighters without a single loss. And the Navy F-18 Hornet is widely recognized as the world's best carrier-based fighter bomber. But in the future, neither the F-15 nor the F-18 will be able to survive against deadly enemy anti-aircraft missiles.
Surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, are going to represent the biggest threat. Those very formidable systems developed in Russia or China will have to be taken out of action very quickly in any future conflict.
The fighter of the future will need to be stealthy to slip past enemy radar. It must be able to take out anti-aircraft installations. And it must out-dogfight any enemy fighters that get in the way. That future fighter is already here. The F-22 Raptor, the air dominance fighter of the 21st century. Developed by Lockheed Martin, this advanced tactical fighter has been designed to be the first plane to cross enemy lines, clearing the way for all other forces.
The F-22 is both an air-to-air fighter and an air-to-surface fighter, so it can drop precision weapons.
That means it'll be able to go in early in a conflict, knock out all the air defenses that an enemy has, and also take out certain ground targets. And open the door for all the U.S. forces, whether they're ground vehicles or other aircraft, to come in and continue the fight.
The development of the F-22 Raptor first began in 1985, when the Air Force requested proposals for an advanced tactical fighter jet to replace the F-15 air superiority fighter. Military planners feared that the F-15 would not be able to counter new air and ground threats on the horizon. The result was the creation of the F-22.
The capability of the aircraft is a quantum leap above what exists right now, and it's going to take air power and revolutionize it into a whole new world.
In the battles of the future, stealth will be critical for all new fighters to avoid being seen by enemy radar.
Non-stealthy aircraft just will not survive in the air battles of tomorrow.
Stealth technology was created to counter advances in radar. Radar works by sending out radio waves and measuring the amount reflected back to determine the distance, speed, and course of an object. But stealth aircraft are designed with surfaces that deflect radio waves away, making them nearly invisible to radar. The world's first stealth production aircraft was the F-117 Nighthawk.
The reason that airplane is faceted is a limitation of the computer technology at the time. It's easier to model a finite number of flat surfaces than it is a bunch of curved surfaces.
And while the aircraft was a breakthrough at the time, the facets limited the plane aerodynamically. But now, thanks to more powerful computers, engineers can design aircraft that do not have to sacrifice aerodynamics for stealth.
The F/A-22's aerodynamic slickness allows it to have the lowest drag of almost any aircraft ever produced.
The F-22's aerodynamic superiority, combined with its stealth and firepower, make it a far better adversary than any aircraft before it. The F-15, which the F-22 will replace, has been a very successful fighter, but it is not stealthy. The F-117, while stealthy, carries no air-to-air weapons and is not designed for air combat. It relies on stealth and mission planning to protect itself. But the F-22, on the other hand, is not only stealthy, but comes with a full complement of air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons.
The primary armament is in weapons bays underneath the airplane, where we carry 6 medium-range radar-guided missiles.
By carrying the weapons internally, it preserves the stealthy shape of the plane. For closer infighting, the F-22 has short-range missiles and guns.
Behind these two doors right here is the side weapons bay. This is where we carry a heat-seeking missile. For close-in armament, the Raptor is equipped with the M61A2 cannon. The muzzle is hidden right behind this door right here. It's hidden because of the stealth characteristics of the airplane. Cannon carries 480 rounds and is capable of shooting 100 rounds a second.
The F-22's advanced weapons systems will make it a formidable interceptor, as will its unique ability to find enemy aircraft without revealing its own position. When other planes use their radar, they become visible to every other radar system in the area. But that's not the case with the F-22.
Perhaps the highest tech part of the airplane is the radome itself. Not only does the radome have to be stealthy, but it has to be able to transmit and receive its own radar signals.
How the F-22 radar achieves that remarkable feat is classified. But what is known is that the F-22 can see enemy aircraft at a distance while remaining invisible to them.
The first time that the bad guys will really know there's an F-22 in the area is when one of them blows up.
Along with its advanced radar system, the F-22 is the first fighter to have Super Cruise, the ability to travel faster than the speed of sound without using its afterburners. A jet's afterburners boost speed by pouring fuel directly into the hot blast of the engines, adding fiery extra thrust. But afterburners are also wasteful, consuming enormous amounts of fuel, dramatically affecting the range and duration of a plane's mission. But the F-22 doesn't have that problem. Without using afterburners, it can supercruise at an incredible 1.5 times the speed of sound, over 1,000 miles per hour.
This is all about our pilots being able to go fast, minimize the amount of time they are exposed to any threat, do the mission that we've sent them to do, turn around and come home safely.
The F-22 is presently the only fighter in the world with supercruise, but it wouldn't be possible without a very unique set of engines.
The goals for Pratt & Whitney were to provide a transformational engine that the Air Force needed, one that was stealthy, maintainable, and fast.
The F-119 PW-100 was developed by Pratt & Whitney after years of research. It sets the new standard for jet engines. Along with its incredible supersonic ability, the F-119 incorporates thrust vectoring.
Here we are at the rear end of an F-A-22 Raptor. First thing you'll notice are the nozzles for the F-119 engines. In flight, during a maneuvering dogfight, they actually move up and down and vector the thrust of the engine to provide maneuverability.
It helps us turn inside any foe, maneuver at low or high speeds to outmaneuver another airplane or potentially an enemy weapon that's headed towards us.
The F-22's stealth, supercruise, and vector thrusting are impressive breakthroughs, but its most outstanding feature may be its ability to nearly fly itself through advanced computerized controls.
It relieves the pilot of all the duties, gives the pilot total freedom to just look out engaged in the combat scenario.
In addition to monitoring its own performance, the F-22 constantly gathers data on other aircraft in the combat area and presents the most important information to the pilot.
We're going to have information passed to us from either unmanned vehicles or from off-board sensors so that we can integrate data and use that information for targeting. And it's the way that we are driving our forces in warfare. We are much more integrated with both other services and with other platforms, and the F-22 fits right into that concept.
The F-22 Raptor's total package of avionics, stealth, supercruise, and thrust vectoring make it the most technologically advanced fighter today.
I've never been in an airplane that accelerates as fast, that's as agile, the ability to turn very sharply, and it just brings a great combination of the speed, the stealth, and the avionics to the fight that nobody else is going to be able to touch.
But there will be future competitors, like the Russian Sukhoi 37, which features thrust vectoring and a radical forward swept-wing design. And the fifth-generation MiG, the 1.22, which some have nicknamed the F-22ski.
The Russians are still very active aircraft developers. They've got a variety of technologies that they're continuing to improve upon and that can be made available to our future enemies. And so that's why we have to stay on top of the technology that we are developing and make sure that it is able to take out anything that other countries develop.
When you look at the adoption by China of the Su-27 and the fact that it'll probably be modernized and improved, that brings up the need for more advanced fighter aircraft in the U.S. And that's one of the main reasons, I think, why the Air Force is so insistent on the need to have the F-22.
In addition to Russia, other U.S. allies are producing advanced interceptors for export that are superior to the F-15, such as Sweden's JAS-39 Gripen and France's new Rafale. Germany, Italy, and the UK have joined forces to create a Eurofighter, the Typhoon. If these planes fall into unfriendly hands, the U.S. Air Force will need the F-22 to maintain their advantage.
We're always going to go into war wanting to have that air dominance, and the F-22 is going to be the big boy on the block that can help us to do that.
In future combat, the F-22 is to be joined by another stealthy aircraft, the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the ground attack bomber of the future. Designed for the U.S. Air Force, Navy, Marines, and Britain's Royal Navy, the question is, will it work for every user? The rules of war have changed. Brute force has given way to high tech, and conventional weapons of the past will no longer be effective. In future battles, the F-22 will be the first fighter to cross enemy lines, surgically removing air and ground targets. Next in, the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the attack bomber of the future. It will assume the air-to-ground attack role for the U.S. military. The F-35 can carry heavy weapons externally for maximum effect. But when a smaller payload is carried internally, it is nearly as stealthy as the vaunted F-117 Nighthawk.
It has a significant amount of stealth capability to allow it to be used early on in a campaign, and it has a significant amount of weapons carrying and payload capability to be used at the later stages of campaign. The threat to the airplanes may not be as significant and require less stealth.
The development of the F-35 was driven by the Armed Forces' desire to save costs by creating a ground attack bomber that would meet the needs of the Air Force, Navy, Marines, and Britain's Royal Navy.
Airplanes are becoming very expensive these days, and we had to do something to get the cost of these airplanes back down to a reasonable level.
The F-35 is expected to cost about $40 million, one-third the cost of an F-22 Raptor. But could one basic airframe be designed to satisfy so many different military demands? Each armed service wanted a stealthy ground attack bomber, but the Marines also needed a plane with short takeoff and vertical landing capability. The U.S. Navy required a craft with larger wings, heavy-duty landing gear, and an arresting hook for carrier landings. And the wings would have to fold up to save deck space.
The size and scope of the JSF program is pretty significant. The airplane is being designed to replace the F-16 and the A-10 for the Air Force, the AV-8B for the Marine Corps, and the FA-18 for the Navy.
Unlike the twin-engine F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter was designed around a single engine to keep down not only costs, but weight. A lighter plane can carry more weapons.
For the Joint Strike Fighter, one of the keys of its mission is the ability to handle a large amount of ordnance and bring it to an enemy site. That all works better with a single engine.
The Air Force version of the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35A, made its first flight attempt on October 24, 2000. Tom Morgenfeld, who had been a test pilot for the F-22 Raptor, was at the controls.
Well, a million things are going through your mind. Your eyes are everywhere, you're listening, you're watching. Your senses are tuned to an incredible level because you're sensing and feeling the airplane for the very first time. It flies wonderfully. It's definitely a pilot's airplane.
The Air Force testing went smoothly. Next, a Navy version was built with heavy-duty landing gear and wider wings for the slow speeds needed to land on carriers. Navy test pilots flew touch and goes, demonstrating the F-35's ability to land within the space of a carrier's flight deck. But the most difficult challenge still lay ahead for the F-35 program. The Marine Corps needed a version that could perform short takeoffs and vertical landings, STOVL for short.
The STOVL capability is extremely important to the Marine Corps because the airplane can go just about anywhere that the rest of the forces can go. It's not limited to needing a large runway. It doesn't need a really big ship to operate off of.
Engineers at Lockheed Martin, the designers of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, took a hard look at the AV-8B Harrier, the STOVL fighter that the new aircraft would have to improve upon.
The Harrier is a great airplane if you look at the fact that it's basically 1960s technology. It's achieving all those wondrous STOVL flight sort of maneuvers without the aid of a lot of computers.
The Harrier's ability to take off, hover, and land vertically is achieved by vectored thrust. The powerful force of its jet engine is directed downwards through 4 nozzles that can pivot 90 degrees.
I was brought in because I am a Harrier pilot with almost 1,600 hours in that airplane. So all of the lessons learned I have from the Harrier airframe and operational experience I have, I was able to bring to the program and use those to help evaluate the X-35 STOVL version.
For hovering, engineers gambled on a radical new system. They planned to supplement the vectored thrust method by harnessing the jet engine to a drive shaft that would power a fan to blast air downward.
In 1991, we unveiled this shaft-driven lift fan system to the technical world. Some actually said, "You gotta be kidding me. Are you guys serious?"
The lift fan required doors to open behind the pilot on the top and bottom of the plane to draw in more air. The fan would blast air down midship, while the jet nozzle in back swiveled, blowing its powerful exhaust down to create a balanced lift force.
The shaft-driven lift fan system allows you to harness a lot more energy out of what the engine is producing.
But harnessing a jet engine to a drive shaft proved to be extremely difficult.
The mechanical energy we were dealing with in the shaft-driven lift fan system was very large. We had 28,000 horsepower being transmitted from the drive shaft from the main engine to the lift fan. And that's similar to the power going through a U.S. naval destroyer.
The lift fan's ability to blend large amounts of cool air with the hot jet exhaust provided another important benefit.
One of the things we learned in JSF was to combine the jet exhaust to get a lower combined temperature than the Harrier. This allowed us to avoid some of the problems with concrete where the concrete would actually burst and explode under the high temperature and high jet exhaust from the Harrier.
At the Lockheed Martin test facility in Palmdale, California, the revolutionary lift fan system was put to the ultimate test, in the air. If the lift fan failed during hover, the plane would crash.
It made its first flight in 2001, and it was a complete success. And at that time, I didn't hear any more from the people who had been saying for years, this thing will never work. It worked.
Now, all three versions of the F-35 for the Air Force, Navy, and Marines are being developed and further tested for mass production. The United States, Britain, and their allies are expected to order more than 4,000 Joint Strike Fighters, which will replace most American-built fighter bombers in use today.
The handling qualities and performance are stunning. It really is a pilot's airplane. It sort of makes you feel like a little boy. You want to take it home and tuck it under the pillow with you at night. It's just a pilot's airplane.
In future air conflicts, the F-22s will be used to establish air dominance. Then waves of stealthy F-35 Joint Strike Fighters will use their superior weapons-carrying abilities to attack other major ground targets.
The Joint Strike Fighter is going to be the backbone airplane for hauling freight. It is going to be the muscle part of sustained forces.
Commanders can also alter an F-35's mission in the air as situations change during the battle.
There are a variety of ways for the F-35 to bring in information from external platforms, other airplanes flying around the battlefield, satellite-based assets, ground-based assets. All that information can be presented to the pilot in the cockpit and allow him to be more of a tactician and manage the tactics of the game that day instead of worrying about the nuances of flying the airplane.
The pilot's job will be to supervise the process of identifying the target and then to give consent for weapons release.
The Joint Strike Fighter will be able to carry a wide range of weapons, to include the heavier weapons such as the 2,000-pound bunker busters and 2,000-pound blast weapons.
The Joint Strike Fighter's 1-ton bunker busters and blast bombs will be guided to their targets with pinpoint precision by JDAM tail kits. The Joint Direct Attack Munition, or JDAM, is a kit that can be put on any bomb to give it the brains to know where to go, and the movable tail fins to guide it there.
JDAM is a guidance kit that came after Desert Storm. This little round piece on the side there is an inertial navigation clock. Now this clock, instead of measuring seconds, measures feet. If you take the unit and you tell it where it is right now electronically, and then you move it back a foot, or you move it up a foot, it measures every centimeter and every distance.
The bomb knows the coordinates of where the airplane is, and it also knows the coordinates of where the target is. And when the weapon is released from the airplane, it simply flies from one set of coordinates to the other and does its thing when it gets there.
Because a JDAM is directed by GPS, or Global Positioning Satellites, it can hit targets regardless of visibility.
The way we use it is by employing it against targets that we cannot normally see visually, whether it is due to weather, smoke, haze, or just some sort of other thing that's obscuring the target.
As a JDAM falls, its inertial clock keeps track of its position and signals the tail to make course corrections, directing it to the target. The accuracy of new weapons like JDAMs will reduce collateral damage. It also makes the F-35 an even more formidable weapon system.
The new weapons such as JDAM really reduce the need for the number of sorties, and that reduces our risk because we're not exposed to enemy threats as often.
The F-35's combination of advanced weapons, avionics, and stealth will help it ensure its success over the battlefields of the future. U.S. military planners wondered if these same features could be utilized in a helicopter. They wanted a stealth helicopter. But could it be done? Over the last 50 years, helicopters have evolved from slow-moving multi-purpose support vehicles to fast-moving frontline attack ships. But in the high-tech wars of the future, speed alone is not enough. Information is the key.
There's three elements that are critical to warfare. The ability for you to know more than the enemy, the ability to maneuver quickly around an enemy and gather more information about them, and the ability to provide precision firepower at the enemy.
In future conflicts, after the F-22 Raptors and the F-35 Joint Strike Fighters have cleared the way, surveillance and attack helicopters will support ground troops as they move in to secure the area.
We like to be down low where the action is, and we like to be down low where the threat can't see us.
But at such low altitudes, helicopters are vulnerable to a wide assortment of ground-to-air weapons.
All the simple systems, the guns, unguided rockets, the surface-to-air missiles, it's got to deal with all of that, and it's got to deal all of it effectively.
The Pentagon has responded with a two-pronged strategy to counter this threat: inexpensive, expendable unmanned helicopters and stealthy manned helicopters. Unmanned helicopters will be primarily used for surveillance and for gathering targeting information. Fire Scout, designed by Northrop Grumman, was specifically developed to take off and land on Navy ships. However, the key to creating a successful manned helicopter for future combat is to make it stealthy like the F-22. But the question is, can it be done?
Achieving stealth in a helicopter is different from stealth in a fixed-wing aircraft. You're concerned about different signatures: radar reflectivity, infrared, noise, all things that will give away an aircraft's position.
Those signatures, like heat, smoke, and sound, put helicopters and their pilots at serious risk over the battlefield.
All the small shoulder-fired missiles, which are very effective against helicopters, are heat-seeking infrared systems.
The challenge for engineers was to create a quiet helicopter with very few signatures and a small radar cross-section. And that's exactly what Sikorsky has done with the new RAH-66 Comanche.
In the Comanche, with all the stealth capabilities, we can defeat the radar threat. We can defeat the guy with the shoulder-launched heat-seeking missile. And from the guy popping up in the tree, our agility defeats him. Our small size, our quiet acoustic signature defeats him.
Often the first thing you hear from a helicopter is the sound of the wake from the main rotor hitting the wake from the tail rotor.
In the Comanche, the fan tail is shrouded, so there is no interaction between the fan blade tips and the main rotor tips, and it's also canted slightly. And those all contribute to reducing the acoustic signature.
Engineers also experimented with the main rotor to find a quieter design.
If you look at a Comanche, it's got a 5-blade rotor, and what that does is it cuts down the normal chop, chop, chop sound from a helicopter into a more discreet whir that kind of blends into the background.
Reducing the heat signature of a helicopter is also essential to making it more survivable.
When you look at a Comanche, the first thing you ask yourself is, where's the exhaust? Where does all this hot air get out of the engine?
The Comanche's exhaust actually escapes through the tail boom, where it is instantly dispersed by cool air from the rotor.
That missile has to have something to home in on, and that's a heat signature. Comanche defeats that by the engine exhaust being mixed with ambient air and cooling it so that there's no longer a heat plume for that missile to home in on.
To defeat radar, the Comanche utilized the stealth secrets first developed for the F-117 Nighthawk. There are no radar-reflecting right angles on its outer fuselage, and all weapons are carried internally to help keep its stealthy shape.
What's interesting about the helicopter is some of the things that achieve stealth actually make the helicopter better. Things like the retractable landing gear and the retractable weapons bays, that also makes it sleeker and faster. So once you've bought into the stealth part of it, you get other superior attributes.
The main role of the Comanche is to give commanders an overview of the battlefield by providing up-to-the-minute information.
Comanche is going to be basically their flying cavalryman. It's going to dart in and out, slash and cut, be a reconnaissance vehicle.
As Comanche's two pilots gather data, their computer shares that data with other Allied forces.
When the Comanche finds the enemy, he's going to kind of direct like a quarterback to apply the firepower to defeat that enemy.
Engineering advances have also made the Comanche one of the easiest and most forgiving helicopters to fly.
One thing that Comanche brings that other previous generation helicopters can't bring to the table is the pilot can maneuver the Comanche in virtually any axis without fear of exceeding any limits.
Although it will be used primarily for reconnaissance, the Comanche will also be armed for self-defense.
The Comanche is capable of carrying a wide array of weapons, all the way from guided missiles using a laser guidance system, heat-seeking missiles, which would be more of an air-to-air weapon, or unguided rockets, and also the latest Hellfire is pretty much a fire and forget.
In addition, Comanche's pilots can ask Allied aircraft to fire missiles their way, and can then take over and guide those missiles to their targets. If the Comanche is hit, its computer system can often fix itself by reassigning vital functions to undamaged computer cards.
This is where the computer brain of the Comanche is.
In support of its reconnaissance mission, Comanche can control as many as 5 unmanned aircraft.
When the Comanche may be employed, it may have little vehicles that it launches out, so it has its own little eyes over the hill so it can see what's going on without putting itself at risk.
In addition to launching its own unmanned air vehicles, Comanches may be aided on the battlefield by swarms of LOCAS, small intelligent missiles with their own computer brains.
It's about 31 inches long, weighs a little over 100 pounds, carries a single warhead, has a laser radar. In other words, it has a scanning laser beam that generates pictures.
The LOCAS also communicate with each other and cooperate in searches and attacks.
You could have a swarm of LOCASes, each of which has its own eyes, each of which is thinking, but each of which is communicating with each other. Send that imagery back to the operators who could either use these as surveillance probes or, in fact, as weapons themselves.
Weapons like LOCAS reflect the trend toward electronically linking all Allied forces and weapons so that information can be shared and used by all. By networking aircraft over the battlefield, with surveillance platforms and other weapons systems, commanders can quickly change missions to take advantage of up-to-the-minute information.
The key to the air battle of the future is not necessarily stealth, speed, or firepower. It's going to be information.
Unmanned air vehicles, or UAVs, will provide a large part of that information while flying long-duration surveillance missions. So, will the Air Force of the future have no pilots? Since the very first use of airplanes in war, military planners have looked for ways to make aircraft more effective and more lethal. Once so secret their very existence was denied by the government, unmanned air combat vehicles, or UCAVs, are now poised to take the preeminent role in 21st century air combat.
UAVs are certainly going to change air power in the 21st century. You can see it starting to happen today, but what we're looking at now is just the beginning, because there's going to be more of them, and they're going to be better.
Unmanned aerial vehicles allow the military to do more with less, to put more aircraft into the air than you otherwise would be able to because of the limited number of pilots that you might have, or where it might be too risky.
In the future, aircraft that have no pilots on board will carry out the most dangerous combat missions. Today, unmanned air vehicles, or UAVs, are already taking over the role of long-duration surveillance.
UAVs don't have mothers. You lose a UAV in combat and nobody bats an eyelid.
One of the earliest surveillance UAVs was the Predator. It was developed in the early 1990s.
When you look at Predator, basically they start off as being long-endurance systems that can really persist over the battlefield.
In Afghanistan, Predators provided critical real-time intelligence. And it was there that a Predator made an amazing transformation from surveillance to armed aerial attack.
Fired a Hellfire missile, an Al-Qaeda convoy, and destroyed one of the vehicles in there. And at that point, it crossed the line from an unmanned aerial vehicle into an unmanned combat aerial vehicle.
Today, the new Predator B can carry up to 10 Hellfire missiles. Of course, its primary mission is still what the military refers to as ISR, or Information, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance.
It's basically a poor man's satellite. I mean, you can bring it in and let it dwell in an area.
UAVs transmit important visual information to battlefield commanders via satellite or other.
Formed a fair bit, but it's certainly kept itself together very well.
There's a dent, but no catastrophic puncture. But on the world's biggest airliner, saving weight is an absolute necessity. So what if we test thinner aluminium at just 0.9 millimeters thick?
This is to save weight. So if we decided that the heavy stuff we used was too much weight, this is what we got. That's the sort of thing you do, yeah.
Right up, let's see what happens. But will it survive?
Whoa! Look, that, straight through. Ooh. Just remind me, this, severe. We haven't used like baking foil or something here. This is... That's the real thing. What's given way? Why has it done that? Why can't it withstand that? Well, it's really just down to the thickness. It's only got a certain amount of give in it. And when you've got a thinner material, then you're really sort of stretching the limits of what it can do. A big hole. Not a good thing in an aircraft fuselage.
The thinner aluminium is stiff enough to make an aircraft's outer skin, but it isn't strong enough to withstand high-speed impacts. It bends, then tears completely like a sheet of paper. No aircraft could risk such a catastrophe on a flight loaded with passengers. But the Airbus designers found a way to make aluminium thin and at the same time incredibly strong. And that's where the Mongol bow comes in. In the 12th century, the Mongol Emperor Genghis Khan set his sights on world domination, and he planned to destroy his enemies with archery. This is the longbow, an extremely powerful weapon constructed from a single piece of wood. The wood must be strong enough to survive the heavy bending force of a man's body weight. But to conquer the world, Genghis Khan needed a bow that could be fired from horseback by mounted warriors in a highly mobile army. I'm about to find out why that was a problem with traditional bowyer Steve Ralphs.
I can see how the principle, the theory works, because, you know, horse, mobile, weapon, great, but practically, how did it actually work? How could I kill somebody with this, sitting on this?
The first shot is here as you come in from the left-hand side of the horse. So it's 1, 2, 3, up and over, 4.
So let me just try those. So, sorry. If there's one thing I need, it's a compact weapon. My arm's twisted now, I can't. And I can vouch for the fact that the longbow is not it. So the problem with the longbow for this job is its longness. So what happens if you try to make a shorter bow with the same power from a single piece of wood?
So I'll give you a short bow.
Thank you.
Some protective equipment.
Right. Yeah, that's not worked at all, has it? Here's why. When a bow is drawn, the outside stretches so that it's longer than before. But the inside squeezes, making it shorter than before. So the bow has to handle two very different forces at the same time. With a shorter bow, the bending is much greater and the wood just isn't strong enough. So the Mongols came up with a brilliant idea. If there are two different forces, use two different materials. This is horn, it's buffalo horn, sort of thing they would have used. Pieces of this, which is, I mean, it's very tough. It doesn't mind being squashed. It can cope with that very well. And then on the outside of that is a layer of sinew, like this, which is happy being stretched. And in fact, I can break it down a bit and we can... The sinew comes from tendons in a deer's hind legs, and its fibres are highly elastic. The combined properties of horn and sinew make for one ideal weapon.
You actually bind sinew to this side of the bow, the back of the bow. You place horn plates on the inside of the bow, on the belly. And then you can, in a very short bow, you get the same drawing.
Now, if you did that with just a wooden one like the one I just did...
Well, you saw the results.
Yeah, but this, you can draw and it can take a bigger curve. Wow, you can feel it. With buffalo horn on the inside and sinew on the outside, the bow can handle squeezing and stretching at the same time.
It's like elastic.
Mongol bows were short enough to fire from horseback, but still strong enough to hit targets 300 meters away. The Mongols developed not just a great weapon, but a great concept, the composite. Take two materials with useful properties and put them together to make something far better. As Genghis Khan might have said, it was easy once you knew how. Fast forward to the 21st century. These sections of the A380's outer skin are made from a composite of two materials. Like the buffalo horn in the Mongol bow, lightweight aluminium provides stiffness. But with a heavy impact, it will bend, then rupture completely. It needs a second material, like the sinew in the Mongol bow, to give it added strength. And Paul Hogg has given me an amazing suggestion. Glass. Well, it broke, obviously, but just tell me, I mean, I knew it would break, but tell me why it broke and how it broke.
Well, basically, it's a brittle material, so it was deformed, cracks just propagated, some of them propagated all the way out, you can see the other ones are formed here. End of the story.
An ordinary sheet of glass feels flimsy to me. It's also scarily light. A short bow made from a single material will bend, then break. The composite bow survives. An aircraft skin made from a single material bends, then ruptures. Can the composite skin withstand the impact? Okay, I've come down to the business end of our little chicken firing range here because I really want to see what happens when the chicken hits the glare. Does it bend? Does it come back? I want to see how it behaves.
You ready, Richard?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Time.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, well, it's not very nice being that close to a very fast chicken, but it's resisted it. It hasn't gone through. There's a dent, but the glare survives. It does work. The two materials working together are better than either alone.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
But could glare even stand up to terrorist attack, like these bomb explosions? In tests, the Federal Aviation Administration placed plastic explosive in a luggage container made of glare. This was the result. A box whose strength comes from glass. For the A380's designers, glare is the perfect combination of high strength and low weight, vital for an airliner this size. Glare forms 470 square meters of the A380's outer skin. It's 25% lighter than aluminium, one reason why the world's biggest airliner has better fuel consumption per passenger than a family car. And thanks to composites, an idea inspired by the Mongol bow, it's tough enough for the rigors of flight, even with a novice pilot.
So Richard, if you want to take control of the airplane now, if you get your hand on the stick ready to take over. Really? Yep. Right. Go for it. If you put full stick to the right now.
Whoa!
There you go.
Whoa!
That's it. And
It feels as light as a feather.
Are we doing aerobatics in the world's largest airline?
When it's in the air, the A380's enormous size is not a problem. But in the next stage of my investigation, I plan to find out why size is a big issue when the A380 is still on the tarmac. This is Airbus headquarters in Toulouse in southwestern France. A nest for breeding the world's biggest birds.
Whoa! This place is unbelievable. Everything in it is vast.
The final assembly line is nearly half a kilometre long and 50 metres high.
Apparently this building is so enormous that, rumour has it, it can form its own clouds up near the ceiling.
On this scale, human beings seem tiny and insignificant. The fully assembled A380 is by far the longest, widest and tallest airliner in history. The upper exits stand nearly 8 metres off the ground. And that's where the problem comes in. If there's an emergency, the passengers have a long way to go to escape and survive. This is an evacuation test of the A380. To satisfy international regulations, all 853 passengers must evacuate, using only half of the plane's 16 exits. They have just 90 seconds, the estimated survival time in the event of fire. To save their lives, passengers need an escape route fast. They're trapped at the height of a 3-story building with nowhere to go. As a result, the A380 has the biggest evacuation slides in the world. But regulations require the slides inflate in just 6 seconds, so that the first passengers to arrive at the doors don't block the exits. The only way to do it is to make a surprising connection between a life-saving slide and a device that was designed to kill. To prove it, I'm going to build and test my own model of an evacuation slide. My airbag is 50 meters long. Even so, it would take nearly 8 of these to make the same volume as an A380 slide. So maybe inflating it won't be too difficult.
This is a very big bag, which basically is what an evacuation slide is. And when it comes to inflating a bag as quickly as possible, well, there is an obvious way to do it.
It should be as simple as blowing up party balloons. Attach the bag to a cylinder of compressed gas and inflate for exactly 6 seconds as per regulations.
Right, are we ready? 3, 2, 1.
It is inflating.
5, 6. Ah.
The trouble is, it's nowhere near fast enough. After 6 seconds, the bag is still much too soft to take the weight of desperately fleeing passengers. So the A380's designers unleashed their secret weapon. Rocket power. I'm using 19th century rockets because the primitive design makes it easy to see the key ingredient, gunpowder. These rockets weren't very accurate in their day, but they did create lots of gas, exactly what we need to fill the bag. All I have to do is make sure the rocket can't move.
And here it is, one rocket fits onto this bed at the back, down this pipe leading to the bag. Obviously the rocket is facing this way because I want the exhaust gases going into the bag, not the actual rocket. So, fix it down. I need a light.
This time, I'm using the rocket gas as a booster and combining it with the compressed gas. But will that be enough to fill the bag in the critical 6 seconds? Nice job on the first half of the bag. Not so good on the second. And for an evacuation slide, anything less than full inflation would cost lives.
Well, the rocket gave us more speed, definitely, but we still didn't fill the bag. We need to get more air in. And to do that, the Airbus designers used one of these.
It's called an aspirator, but it's basically just a funnel. As the funnel gets narrower, the rocket gas moving through it speeds up, causing the pressure to drop. That should create a vacuum effect, sucking in extra air from the surroundings to inflate the slide. But will it be enough to transform a weapon into a lifesaver? It's a stunning success, easily inflating in 6 seconds. 2/3 of the gas filling the bag is fresh air, sucked in by the aspirator. And that's how you rescue people with rocket power.
I mean, it works. Clearly, it works. It might have been pretty useless as a weapon of war, but turns out it can save lives.
With this device, the A380's slides inflate in 4 seconds, 2 whole seconds inside the required time. In the emergency drill, all 853 passengers evacuated in 78 seconds, easily beating the 90-second limit. Thanks to rocket-powered slides, the A380 was officially certified to fly. But the designers hope they'll never be used in a real emergency.
Needless to say, if you're an engineer, it's better to ensure that an emergency never happens in the first place.
On any given flight of the A380, one moment above all is fraught with danger. Touchdown. The earth-shattering collision of wheels and tarmac. The world's biggest airliner weighs 560 tons, almost as much as 200 family cars. But a single piece of life-saving technology must bring all 853 people gently to Earth. I'm about to find out what it is by landing the world's biggest airliner myself at New York's John F. Kennedy Airport.
This is not a normal approach to New York.
I'm with pilot Peter Chandler in the A380's state-of-the-art flight simulator. It rocks and rolls on huge hydraulics, making the effect in the cockpit highly realistic.
That's so convincing. Heart's going.
If you're ready,
yes,
you probably ought to take control.
Yes, right.
And I'll sort out the configuration of the airplane.
Right.
That's the landing gear going down.
So they're now hanging in the breeze, which, you know, would...
Yeah.
For you
just
and me,
concentrate on following the green cross. So you need to pull the nose up a bit.
Sorry.
Peter's controlling the engines and the A380's airspeed, giving me less to think about. But I must still use the joystick to keep the plane level and straight before the final approach.
Yeah, you're a bit to the right, actually, so you want to come to the left a bit.
All right.
That's it.
A normal soft landing requires an incredibly slow rate of descent. Just 1 meter per second, slower than walking speed.
Back on the stick a bit.
190. Sink rate. Sink rate.
Oh, what does that mean? No, that's it. That's it.
Retard.
Good. Well done. Okay, I have control.
My landing was at double the normal speed, so the simulator gave me a very heavy jolt.
I'm actually bathed in a fine layer of sweat.
In real life, this impact would be easily absorbed by the A380's landing gear. Each set of wheels is cushioned by a giant shock absorber, the crucial technology for bringing passengers safely to Earth. Witness this notorious incident at Hong Kong's Kai Tak Airport in 1993. A Boeing 747 gets caught in a heavy crosswind while approaching the runway. As the jumbo jet twists in the wind, a single set of landing gear sustains the entire impact. But it's strong enough to survive. The A380's landing gear is rated to handle such extreme landings at 4 times the normal descent rate. But the colossal A380 is 40% heavier than a Boeing 747. And here's an amazing fact. The A380's landing gear is based on the same principle as the device that keeps your bicycle in perfect working order. Engineer Todd Todeschino plans to prove it with a bizarre experiment. This is his stand-in for the A380, a 200-kilogram piano. It's going to drop from a crane and land at 30 kilometers per hour. But Todd thinks he can give it a soft landing using exactly the same principle as the A380's landing gear. It comes from an old-fashioned but brilliant invention. You can make a shock absorber from a bicycle pump. If I make the hole smaller, the air can't get out so easily, and it's squashed or compressed, resisting my arm like that. It isn't pumping anything anymore, but it is absorbing the energy. The A380's massive shock absorbers may look like heavyweight, high-tech engineering. But Todd thinks each one is just a cylinder with a piston inside. A giant bicycle pump.
Right, big sheet of plywood.
Yeah.
Okay. Piano sitting on top of the plywood. And that's what we drop from the crane. So we'll put the bicycle pumps underneath the piano. So it'll be like a whole load of sort of fingers of bicycle pumps coming down underneath the whole sort of framework.
So this framework becomes our landing gear, if you like.
Yeah.
This gives us a mounting point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Todd gets on with the basic framework, while I find out what we're up against.
For any experiment to be scientifically rigorous, you've got to have a control.